Mr. David Schnaars was born on February 24, 1944, and served in the Army. His highest rank was Spec 5. He grew up in the Danville-Bloomsburg area in a little village called Jerseytown, Pennsylvania. As a young child, his parents were very involved in his and his siblings' lives. He has two brothers, Donald and Danny. Donald is the oldest, while Danny is the youngest. His best friends were Hugh Whitmore and Galen Smith. Mr. Schnaars had two other family members in the military, his brother Donald and his father. His dad was a lieutenant and a B-17 co-pilot during World War II, and Donald joined in the National Guard. Mr. Schnaars was drafted into the military. At this time, he was married only 5 months, so he and his wife were not expecting him to leave so soon.
Mr. Schnaars began his service on New Year's Day, 1969. His basic training was located in New Jersey during a very cold winter year. Mr. Schnaars caught a case of strep throat right at the end of his training, so he didn't get to graduate with the people he had been with. He then graduated with the following class. He told us that he did not become close with any of the people he did basic training with because you were there for 8 weeks and there to learn. The basic training he did lasted 8 weeks and was located at Fort Dix. While he was over there, his wife had their first child, Joanne. He left the Corps to be with her. He served at Fort Benning for a while, and then in January of 1970, he got departed overseas to Vietnam on the following day by plane. While on the plane, he took a picture of the clouds outside the window on his birthday, 1970. Mr. Schnaars was a keeper of flagged records. He was not trained for his job. He had OJT, on-the-job training. The first day he was there, they gave him 2 huge books and told him that he had 3 days to read everything. Then his job would start. Therefore, he wasn't exactly trained for his job. He learned how to do everything himself. Mr. Schnaars was the one who was in charge of everybody's information. On any given day, he would have to make multiple copies of this information. He said he would have to make 7 to 15 handwritten copies of this because there were no computers back then to do it for him.
It was not easy to contact your family back then. Mr. Schnaars had to use mail or something called MARS, which stands for Military Affiliated Radio Stations. What that was amateur radio people in the country that were willing to be contacted by the military over there. So you went to a station, you then got hooked up with some amateur radio operator somewhere near your home, who would then put in a phone call to your family. He and his family only had 3 minutes, and the end of that time, they would cut you off. There was a certain radio protocol they had to follow. They had to finish saying what you were saying, and then you had to say over so the radio operators could throw the switch so the person on the other end could answer you. He did that about 3 or 4 times, but it was not very satisfactory because 3 minutes went by awfully quick.
Occasionally, if you're willing to be up late and wait in line, they had this thing called MARS, Military Affiliated Radio Stations. And what there was there were amateur radio people in this country that were willing to be contacted by the military over there. And so you went to a station, basically it was an amateur radio. They got hooked up with some amateur radio operator somewhere near your home who would then put a phone call into your family.
Mr. Schnaars said it was very hard for him not being able to communicate with his family often. On the 2nd anniversary of him and his wife, they were 10,000 miles apart because of him being overseas. On their 3rd anniversary, he was out of the service, but working in one city, and she was living still near his parents. Then finally on their 4th anniversary, they got to be together. He said that his wife wrote him regularly. She wrote every couple of days, and the mail was a little slow getting there, so he would receive a stack of letters about once a week, and he would just sit there and go through them.
In Vietnam, Mr. Schnaars lived in a tropical zone area, so it was always very warm. He lived in long barracks that were called hooches at the time. He had a space about 8 feet wide, which was a half wall up, that he had to share with another person. The bunk and lockers were also in that space. The rest of the room was all open. He said it was kind of noisy because there were anywhere from 30 to 50 people in that.
These are the living quarters, the hooches I was talking about. Okay. As you can see, they're rather primitive. There's nothing fancy about those.
There was no running water in the hooch. He had to go outside to wash and go to the bathroom. there was very little privacy. The meals were not bad, he told us, that the people fed them and the others pretty well. There was usually a meat, vegetable, and potato meal. Mr. Schnaars brought along a few photos to the interview. One picture was of the hooches. Another one was taken of children. These children are the ones he taught English to while he was overseas.
Everyone had to serve perimeter duty, Mr. Schnaars said. He also spoke to us about an attack he experienced one time. He said he dropped to the ground and hugged the Jeep's back tires. These rockets were being shot at them while they were unloading their Jeep. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it was quite the experience. Fortunately, Schnaars has never experienced any casualties, but he still came across some hard times. Another emotional moment Mr. Schnaars shared with us was when he watched a video of his daughter while over in Vietnam. His wife acquired an 8mm movie camera at the time. She, at one point, had sent him over this amazing movie that was pretty much centered around Joanne. His wife caught Joanne falling asleep while having a piece of strawberry licorice in her hand. The little baby would beat the licorice and then chew on it, then fall asleep. Mr. Schnaars thought it was the cutest thing he had ever seen. The only way he could see it, of course, was with a projector, and he did not have one. So he went from place to place and company to company looking around the base until he found somebody who had an 8mm projector so they could show him the video. Finally, he found someone. He explained the whole situation to him and what it was, and the man said he would be happy to play it. The two of them sat and watched the video and had a great time. After it was over, the man asked if he could play it again. Of course, Mr. Schnaars said sure. So this man started calling everybody in to watch the video of his child. So there he was, with all of these strangers around him, watching this kid fall asleep in a stroller with licorice. He had such a great time that night because it felt like a piece of home, so it struck the chord for all of them.
We had acquired an 8mm movie camera at the time. Didn't have neat little video cameras like that. And my wife, at one point, had sent me over this wonderful movie that was pretty much centered around Joanne. And she caught Joanne falling asleep. You ever seen a baby falling asleep in this walker? And it was just a ride because her head would go down and it would jerk up, and then it'd go down and jerk up. And she just did a marvelous job with that. And at one point, Joanne had a piece of licorice, the strawberry licorice, and she would chew on it a while, and then she'd beat it, and then she'd chew it on it and beat it.
He came home before Thanksgiving. He told us that he did not experience what most of his fellow soldiers did. He told us that everyone just acted like the war never happened. One time, in his ethics class, they were talking about the army invading the national borders to go to Cambodia. While he tried to comment and tell the class the whole story, they shut him down and could say nothing. Mr. Schnaars told us that him and his wife went out to dinner one night after he got home. His parents said they would babysit, so the two of them went out to eat. They missed each other and wanted to catch up. He and his wife were at the restaurant from 7:30 to 11:30 p.m. They sat at the same table for 4 hours, and the waitress never asked them to move once. Mr. Schnaars thought that she could kind of sense what was going on. So because of her kindness and her letting them occupy her table all that night, he left her a very generous tip.
Being away from his family was a very emotional time for Mr. Schnaars. Although he met some memorable people while in the service, his favorite part was coming home. We thank Mr. Schnaars for his service and participating in our interview.